Light is the sign and condition of life.
Light is the goal of all of our days.
At birth, we emerge from darkness to a light so dazzling that at first we cannot see. But as the eye adjusts, we learn that merely to see is not always to understand. Illumination is not enough. To understand, we need enlightenment.
We seek enlightenment, an inner light whose fuel derives from wells of wisdom. Should time or truth exhaust one source of knowledge, we must find another. Ours is an endless challenge to search out wisdom from its hidden depths, that it may brighten and enlighten our lives.
On this eve of a new year, we rededicate ourselves to this search.
Say together.
Radiant is the light of the world. Radiant is the light within each person. Radiant is the light of peace.
The universe knows no calendar. The earth has no clock. Humanity does. There are times when we pause our constant motion, look at the world we have built ourselves, and wonder, what does it all mean? Is it all worth it? And can I go on? It is those times that our deepest need is renewal.
If people learned anew in every generation, we would never progress. Language, culture, and civilization exist because past generations provided experience and wisdom. Our inheritance lifts us beyond nature, beyond the cycle. Winter never learns from autumn, and summer never knows nothing of spring. Yet we have learned from our ancestors as our children will learn from us. We are renewed by what is timeless in human experience: family, love, ideas, and community. We renew each other with our love and support. We renew ourselves with our commitment to core values. We are the meaning of life. We go on.
In the 7th month, on the first day of the month, there shall be a solemn service, a time to refrain from work, a day of commemoration proclaimed to the sound of the shofar, a sacred assembly. Please say with me, sound the shofar on the new moon and in the time appointed for our festival day. Tekiah. Shevarim. Teruah. Tekiah. Who can ignore the sound of the shofar? Raucous and discordant, it ties us to the past and shocks us out of reveries. We are called upon to reflect, but we are also called to action. Please say with me, the blast of the shofar awakens us to see the world as it is, to see ourselves as we are. It calls us to strive for a just and peaceful world. The shofar challenges us to become what we are capable of becoming. May the sound of the shofar not fall upon deaf ears. The shofar evokes strong and elemental forces, urges and fears. It calls us to take account of these forces within ourselves in our reflection about the coming year. This day is known as Yom Teruah, the day of sounding, and Yom Hadin, the day of judging. which we understand as self-reflection, self-examination. We listen to the voice within. We spend these days reflecting on where we have been and on where we are going, for our future must be informed by our past. Please say with me, may this day help us to find meaning and fulfillment in our lives. Let the shofar's call awaken the voice of our conscience. And so we say again, Tekiah.
Where do we find wisdom? Traditional Jewish thought saw the Torah as the embodiment of wisdom. Turn it and turn it, for all is inside it. Some medieval rabbis explored philosophy to find insight from reason and the human experience. Yet those rabbis had faith that every path of wisdom led to the same conclusion. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. What was old was true. Society today doubts the wisdom of the past. With technology, equality, freedom, and choice, our lives are radically different from that of the Torah's authors over 2 millennia ago. They knew nothing of psychology, evolution, physics, or genetics. How could ancient insights into the human experience be worth knowing? What is new is true. There is a wiser path than either extreme. The beginning of wisdom is acquire wisdom, and with all that you acquire, achieve understanding. Wisdom comes from many sources, ancient and new, Jewish and human, written and spoken, and sung and lived. If we want wisdom, we hear many sources and then achieve understanding. What is true will be true.
Could I ask you to please rise as we remove our Torah from the ark? This year, our Rosh Hashanah Torah reading comes from Exodus chapter 13. Vayomer Moshe el ha'am, Zachor et hayom hazeh asher yatzatem mimitzrayim, mibet avadim, ki bechozek yad hotzi yave etchem mizeh, velo ye'achel chametz. Hayom atem yotzim b'chodesh ha'aviv. V'haya ki yaviacha Yahweh el eretz haknaani v'hachiti v'ha'emori v'hachivi v'hayevusi asher nishba la'avotecha latet lecha eretz zavat chalav u'dvash ve'avadata et ha'avoda hazot b'chodesh hazeh shiv'at yamim tochal matzot uvayom hashvi'i chag leYahweh matzot ye'achel et shivat hayamim ve'lo yira'e lecha chametz ve'lo yira'e lecha she'ar b'kol gevulcha. V'higadeta levincha bayom hahu lemor ba'avur ze asa Yahweh li b'tzeti mimitzrayim. V'haya lecha le'ot al yadecha u'lezikaron ben enecha lema'an tehye torat Yahweh b'ficha ki b'yad chazaka hotziacha Yahweh mimitzrayim u'shmarta et hachuka hazot lemo'ada miyamim yamimah. V'haya ki yaviacha Yahweh el eretz hakanaani ka'asher nishba lecha u'le'avotecha u'natna lecha v'ha'avarta kol peter rechem leYahweh v'kol peter sheger bahema asher yihyeh lecha hazacharim leYahweh v'kol peter chamor tifdeh baseh v'im lo tifdeh v'arafto V'chol bechor adam bevanecha tifdeh. V'haya ki yishalcha bincha machar lemor mazot. V'amarta alav b'chozek yad hotzianu Yahweh mimitzrayim mibet avadim. V'yehi ki hiksha paro lishalchenu v'yaharog Yahweh et bechor eretz Mitzrayim mi bechor adam ad bechor behema al ken ani zoveach leYahweh kol peter rechem hazecharim v'chol bechor banai afte v'haya laot al yadcha ulatotafot ben enecha ki bechozek yad hotzianu Yahweh mi Mitzrayim. Moses said to the people, "Remember this day in which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For by strength of hand Yahweh the God has brought you out from this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. Today you go out in the month of spring, Aviv. It shall be when Yahweh brings you into the land of the Canaanite and the Hittite, the Amorite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, which he swore to your fathers to give to you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall keep this service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and in the 7th day shall be a feast to Yahweh. Unleavened bread shall be eaten through the 7 days, and no leavened bread shall be seen with you. No yeast shall be seen with you in all of your borders. You shall tell your son on that day, saying, 'It is because of what Yahweh did for me when I came from Egypt.' It shall be a sign to you on your hand, a memorial between your eyes, that Yahweh's law may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand Yahweh brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this ordinance in its season from year to year. It shall be when Yahweh brings you into the land of the Canaanite as he swore to you and to your fathers, and will give it to you, that you shall set apart to Yahweh all that opens the womb, and every firstborn that comes from an animal which you have. The males shall be for Yahweh. Every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb, and if you will not redeem it, then you shall break its neck. And you shall redeem all the firstborn among your sons. It shall be, when your son asks you in time to come, saying, 'What is this?' that you shall tell him, 'By strength of hand Yahweh brought us out from Egypt, from the house of slavery. When Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, Yahweh killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of livestock. Therefore I sacrifice to Yahweh all that opens the womb that are male, but all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. It will be a sign on your hand and symbols between your eyes, for by strength of hand Yahweh brought us out of Egypt." This Torah passage is not the traditional Rosh Hashanah Torah reading. You might have guessed from the references to matzah. In a humanistic congregation, we choose what we study from the library of Jewish culture. So why did I choose to talk about Passover during Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year, and Passover is 6 months away. However, if we go back far enough in Jewish cultural history, Passover was in the first month, and Yom HaTeruah, the day of sounding the shofar, was in the 7th month. You might have noticed that in one of the readings in the service today. On the 7th month, sound the shofar. What happened? The tradition changed. The Jewish New Year moved from spring to fall, as it is today. The tradition changed? Well, if tradition is a living thing, it grows and adapts and changes. Is it still Passover if we eat matzah at the Seder but do not purge our pantries of all leavened food? This Torah passage says no, but we say yes. If we no longer sacrifice the firstborn of our livestock, if we no longer redeem the firstborn of our sons who still belong to a possessive God, are we still heirs to the Exodus story? This passage says no, but we say yes. The traditions described here, eating matzah in the spring and redeeming the firstborn, those traditions may have already existed when the Exodus story was first written. Ancient observances dedicated to agricultural and animal fertility were connected with a new story. If you remove the old wheat, it is a sign of faith in the new harvest. The same is true for sacrificing the firstborn animals hoping for future birth. This would be nothing new in the history of traditions. New reasons for old observances, that's old news. Maybe these traditions were something new that was claimed to be something old. If you are creating a founding myth about an event that supposedly happened a long time ago, the myth becomes that much more compelling when attached to ritual practice. And the ritual practice is more compelling when it is claimed to be ancient, from the time of entering the land of Canaan or from the moment of the Exodus itself. That too would be nothing new. There's even an academic term for it, traditioning. Claiming something new is really an ancient tradition. That's traditioning. And what's wrong with you that you've never heard of it? New observances claiming old reasons, that's also old news. Or maybe the Torah is telling some kind of truth here, and these ritual practices really began during some kind of exodus. So why write this passage? Two reasons, both essential to traditions. First, a ritual action connects you to the story. Lighting Hanukkah candles, eating Passover matzah, hearing the shofar. The story is more believable and the ritual is more meaningful because they reinforce each other. Even more important is the second reason. As it says in this passage, when your child comes to you in the future and asks you, Mazot, what is this? Traditions without teaching have no future. As it says, you will tell your child, the Hebrew is higadata. You can even hear the word haggadah built into that verb. Those American immigrant Jews who used Yiddish as a secret language to talk around their children did their children a disservice because their children did not learn the Yiddish language. I fully understand their motivation. I remember the tragedy when our first child learned what we meant by ICECREAM. Traditions that last are not just observed, they are taught. Traditions that last are not just performed by rote, they are given reasons. Traditions that last are not just reenacting the past, they give raw material to the next generation to create new meaning in the future. These Torah passages, including that simple question, Mazot, what is this? They lived on in the Passover Haggadah. And the Passover Haggadah has seen 1,000 rebirths in new formats, new illustrations, new texts and new contexts, new symbols and new meaning. The Exodus event this passage and these symbols tell us to remember may never have actually happened. I certainly hope it never happened, given the killing of the firstborn, a scary reason to keep a tradition. What we remember is the creation of the tradition, its evolution through Jewish culture, its example to us as we create our own meaningful Judaism. We too must answer that simple question from the child who can barely ask, Mazot, what is this? This is the Jewish culture I received from the past, and I pass it on to you. Can I ask you to please rise as we return our Torah scroll to the Ark?
Rosh Hashanah offers the hope of new beginnings. We remain responsible for the mistakes of our past and the errors of our future, but we have the opportunity to start anew, to look at our lives with new eyes, to see a situation from a different perspective, to carry out changes that will draw our lives closer to the vision of the good. Self-reflection may reveal areas of our lives that require attention. Do our family relationships require attention? Is our career no longer a source of fulfillment? Do we invest sufficient energy in our commitments? Are we trapped in the pursuit of goals that violate our deepest values? Rosh Hashanah helps us look at ourselves with the eyes of truth and empowers us to take responsibility for our lives once more. If our relationships are weak, how can we strengthen them? If there are problems at work, what must we do to fix them? If our pursuits are trivial, if our commitments are shallow, if our lives are not worthy of our children's emulation, let us acknowledge our errors and begin anew.
Time is the precious, forever-changing stuff of our lives. With it, all is possible. Without it, nothing. We awaken in the morning, and lo, our purse is magically filled with 24 hours of the unmanufactured tissue of life. It is ours. No one can take it from us. It is unstealable. In the realm of time, there is no aristocracy of wealth nor of intellect. Genius is never rewarded by even an extra hour a day. It has been said that 1,000 years in the sight of eternity are but as a day. But our day is our eternity, and in it we have a chance, our only chance, to know goodness and truth and fulfillment. May we know the truth that every day, every moment is our eternity.
Nishmat. We are given fire to see against the dark, to think, to read, to study how we are to live, to bank ourselves against defeat and despair that cool and muddy our resolves, that make us forget what we saw, what we must do. We are given passion to rise like the sun in our minds with the new day and burn the debris of habit and greed and fear. We stand in the midst of the burning world, primed to burn with compassionate love and justice, to turn inward and find holy fire at the core, to turn outward and see the world that is all of one flesh with us, see under the trash, through the smog, the furry bee in the apple blossom, the trout leaping, the candles our ancestors lit for us.
Song for Dov Shamir. Working is another way of praying. You plant in Israel the soul of a tree. You plant in the desert the spirit of gardens.
Praying is another way of singing. You plant in the tree the soul of lemons. You plant in the gardens the spirit of roses.
Singing is another way of loving. You plant in the lemons the spirit of your son. You plant in the roses the soul of your daughter.
Loving is another way of living. You plant in your daughter the spirit of Israel. You plant in your son the soul of the desert.
"The path is so lovely," said the boy. "The path is so hard," said the lad. "The path is so long," said the man. The grandfather sat on the side of the path to rest.
Sunset paints his gray head gold and red. The grass glows at his feet in the evening dew. Above him, the day's last bird sings. Will you remember how lovely, how hard, how long was the path?
You said, "Day chases day, and night, night." In your heart you said, "Now the time has come." You see evenings and mornings visit your window, and you say, "There is nothing new under the sun."
Now, with the days, you have whitened and aged, your days numbered and tenfold dearer, and you know every day is the last under the sun, and you know every day is new under the sun.
Shalom. Jewish culture, at its best, is a culture of give and take, of negotiation and thorough examination of all aspects of a given issue, of keen persuasion and arguments for the sake of heaven, but also of strong passions merely masquerading as arguments for the sake of heaven. This spiritual foundation is quite compatible with polyphonic democracy, a choir of different voices coordinated by a system of authoritative rules, lights but not light, beliefs and opinions but not belief and opinion. As legitimate heirs, we are not slaves to our inheritance, but may choose to highlight one aspect and downplay another. We may seek to develop a dialectic relationship between Jews and their culture, one in which an element of recurrence is also desirable. What flourished yesterday will fertilize that which will flourish tomorrow, and what will flourish tomorrow may in fact resemble that which flourished the day before yesterday. Cultures have seasons. For thousands of years, Jewish culture has been enriched by other cultures, on which it has in turn left its mark. All of this is encapsulated in the biblical phrase, renew our days as of old. You cannot renew something without of old, and of old has no future without renewal.
Shall I cry out in anger because the gift of life is mine but for a while? Shall I forget the blessing of health the moment it gives way to illness and pain? Shall I be ungrateful for the moments of laughter, the days of gladness and festivity? When tears cloud my eyes and darken the world, and my heart is heavy within me, shall I blot from my mind the love I have known and in which I have rejoiced? When a fate beyond my understanding takes from me friends and kin whom I have cherished, and leaves me bereft of shining presences that have lit my way through years of companionship and affection, shall I grieve for a youth that has gone once my hair is gray and my shoulders bent, and forget days of vibrancy and power? Shall I, in days of adversity, fail to recall the hours of joy and glory that outnumbered my pain? Shall the time of darkness put out forever the glow of the light in which I once walked? Those I have loved, though now beyond my view, have given form and quality to my being, and they live on, unfailingly feeding my heart and mind and imagination. They have led me into the wide universe I continue to inhabit, and their presence is more vital to me than their absence. Bounties once granted shed their radiance evermore. If you are comfortable standing, could I ask you to please stand for just a moment? The turning of the seasons and the turning of the calendar puts us in mind of the passage of time and the power of memory. At the beginning of a new Jewish year, we think back to the losses of the past Jewish year, those loved ones who have become memory and who live on in our minds and our hearts. We still love them even though they are gone, and we still feel the love that they give to us. Let us pause for a moment of silent tribute to their memories and in memory of our loved ones. In the Hebrew Bible and the book of Proverbs, we read, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the memory of a good person is a blessing to us. Please be seated. Spoiler alert, people change. If we change, then our relationships with other people will also change. Consider parents and children. When we are 5 years old, we are convinced that our parents know everything. When we are 15 years old, we are sure that our parents know absolutely nothing. As time goes on, we become adults, maybe 25 years old, maybe 35. We realize that our parents are people, just people, not perfect and not terrible. They are imperfect people who were sometimes wise and sometimes foolish. They made mistakes and they made good choices. Ideally, we forgive them their faults. We are grateful for their gifts. We learn from their best. We avoid their worst. A mature relationship with our parents as people is more complicated as adults than it was when we were 5 or 15. A complicated relationship is also richer, deeper, more realistic, more honest. We change, they change, the relationship changes. That is as it should be. This High Holidays, we explore complicated relationships. How do we relate to Jewish tradition if we live non-traditional lives? How do we connect with groups without falling victim to groupthink? How should we relate to Israel as home to almost half of the world's Jews and an ethnic state entangled with Orthodox Judaism and all the problems those entail? In a season dedicated to repairing relationships, how can we better relate to each other in all of our complications? And can we come to terms with our relationships with loved ones even after they are gone? Simplistic relationships have superficial rewards. And some relationships are so painfully complicated that we are better off letting them go. We will examine the in-between. Complicated relationships worth keeping despite their complications. Perhaps worth keeping because of their complications. When we hear the word tradition, it's hard not to sing it. Tradition. The irony of the musical Fiddler on the Roof is that the show is really about how traditions fall apart, and sometimes for the better. In the original Yiddish stories about Tevye the milkman, published around 1900, Tevye rejects his third daughter for marrying out, and there is no reconciliation. That ending reflected Jewish tradition. When Zero Mostel first played Tevye on Broadway, he played that moment of rejection with full anger. It was the anger of rejection he had felt from his family 20 years before when he married out. In that scene, his never cut to the quick. However, the Broadway musical, written in the 1960s, has a softer ending than the Yiddish original. Tevye eventually accepts Chana and her love. In our days, acceptance has also become a Jewish tradition, celebrating love however and with whomever your children find it. The implied next act of the musical Fiddler is Jewish success and freedom in America, with some traditions and without others. It is sad that Tevye has to leave his shtetl, but the fiddler comes with him, and we know where he goes and what happens after. If we had been Jews in the audience in 1964, we were the happy ending. Today we can sing tradition, and we can pick up brides and grooms on chairs, even if most of our actual grandparents never actually were picked up on chairs at their weddings. Thank goodness we do not have to live in the world of tradition described in that opening song, where women minded the children and tended the home, and men longed to sit in the synagogue and study the holy books 7 hours every day. Tradition up to a point. Tonight we celebrate a traditional Rosh Hashana. It is after sundown on the first night of Tishrei, the first month in our current Hebrew calendar. We lit candles to begin our observance. We heard the shofar blow the 3 traditional sounds of Tekiah, Shevarim, Teruah. Our shofar sounding was live and used the horn of an animal, not recorded or on a metal trumpet. We read from a Torah scroll, and we heard Avinu Malkeinu, at least a version of Avinu Malkeinu. We have sung Hebrew, we have remembered our dead, we have stood in unison and we sat in unison. We thought about the year just concluded and we consider our choices for the year just begun. And our service will be followed by bagels, a traditional Kol Hadash Rosh Hashana. Tonight we are also celebrating a non-traditional Rosh Hashana. We used sound amplification. We are webcasting, and we will turn out the lights at the end of the night. The Torah and rabbinic prohibitions on doing work on the holy day do not bind us. Our Torah reading was not the rabbinically required passage about Isaac's birth in Genesis 21, or his almost murder in Genesis 22, or the animal sacrifices offered when the Jerusalem temple still stood. Our reading was something different that I chose, and it will be different next Rosh Hashanah. We adapted traditional texts to reflect humanistic beliefs, and we used English poetry and prose to inspire us rather than page after page of Hebrew text. Our services are focused on human forgiveness of each other and ourselves, rather than petitioning a God for cosmic atonement and one more year in a supernatural book of life. And we do not believe in the Jewish tradition of Kol Isha Erva, the voice of a woman singing is like nakedness. At our gender-integrated congregation of Kol Hadash, a new voice, we appreciate the incredible beauty of our all-gender choir. I do not think anyone walked here tonight to observe the prohibition on lighting a fire by driving an internal combustion engine. If you did walk, kol hakavod, all honor to you, even if I have chosen differently. You may be interested to know that 2 months ago, the conservative movement's Rabbinic Committee on Jewish Law and Standards debated whether or not one could use an electric car on Shabbat and Jewish holidays. After all, there's no fire. The committee issued 2 opinions. If the ratio is 2 Jews, 3 opinions, I guess it's 1 committee, 2 opinions. The opinion in favor of allowing electric cars on holy days received 10 votes for, 6 votes against, and 5 abstentions. The opinion opposed to electric car usage was also approved, 11 in favor, 5 opposed, and 5 abstentions. However, conservative rabbinical students are not allowed to travel by car on Shabbat, and Israeli conservative Jews have rejected the car permission entirely, electric or otherwise. With 1 ruling in favor and 1 opposed, each American conservative congregation and their members will make their own choices, as American Jews tend to do anyways. One of the ways humanistic Jews are non-traditional is that we are not limited by what Jewish law has to say about driving on Rosh Hashanah, about what we eat, or where we sit in synagogue, or who can sing, or whom we marry. Humanistic Jews can learn about Jewish law as a record of historic and current Jewish practice, as an expression of Jewish values, as a conversation about meaning-making in the world, but we are not bound by its ritual prohibitions. Our Judaism is ours, not theirs. The conservative movement issued multiple opinions on using an electric Rosh Hashanah. The fact that they accepted 1 in favor and 1 opposed, and Jewish people are going to do what they want to anyways, that demonstrates a Jewish tradition that we value, the tradition of argument, debate, and sometimes agreeing to disagree. 2 Jews and 3 opinions, the Jewish person on an island who builds both their own synagogue and the one they won't set foot in, the argument over which way to observe a particular tradition when in fact the argument itself is actually the tradition. There is a Jewish tradition of debate, and there are also Jewish traditions of banning heresy and expelling those who violate community norms, Jewish traditions of prescribing belief and demanding conformity. The Jewish battle between diversity and conformity is just one more argument within the Jewish tradition. That model of Jewish debate and coexistence despite disagreement from Talmud to today is not just useful for Jews. What is Jewish is human too. The first talking movie was The Jazz Singer in 1928, and it is a very Jewish story. Jack, the son of a cantor, wants to sing jazz in bars, while his father wants his son Yaakov to be a pious Jew and sing Kol Nidre on Yom Kippur. Jack leaves home for jazz and the wider world. He becomes famous, but his heartstrings are pulled every time he hears Kol Nidre. Back in New York for his Broadway debut, Jack is torn between loyalty to family and tradition and his own opportunity and joy, torn between being Yaakov and being Jack. In the Hollywood ending, Jack manages to both sing Kol Nidre and debut on Broadway, with his Yiddish mama and his blonde girlfriend sitting in the audience together. Why was The Jazz Singer a smashing success? It's such a Jewish story. Part of it was the amazing technology for the day. Part of it was Al Jolson's magnetic personality. At its heart, the movie is a Jewish story about grappling with tradition, the old country versus new ideas, ancient tradition versus the attraction of fast music and beautiful people. That story is a very human story. Between 1880 and 1920, more than 20 million immigrants came to the United States. 2 million were Jewish, many of them our ancestors. Over 18 million were Italian, German, Chinese, and they grappled with the same issues: the old country versus new ideas, ancestral tradition versus the creativity of dynamic culture. The Jazz Singer was an American story, a human story, the story we are still living. Clearly, we have a complicated relationship with tradition, and we do not all have the same relationship with tradition. My father grew up in a Syrian Jewish Orthodox household. He attended public school with religious school afterwards 7 days a week, regular attendance at services on Shabbat, but it was a more relaxed orthodoxy. Nevertheless, the belief system was very traditional. Growing up, he was absolutely convinced that a God was watching what he did and keeping score, writing his name in the book of life, making a list and checking it twice. As my father became an adult, he rejected that belief system, eventually settling in Humanistic Judaism, where I was raised. He and I had different relationships to tradition. When I was in college, occasionally he would come to visit his family in Brooklyn, New York, and I would come down on the train to spend the weekend with them as well. Once, during one of those visits, we were at a family dinner, and my father's brother, who had never left that community or that mindset, asked me what I was studying in college. I was majoring in Jewish studies. And so I mentioned I was taking an interesting class on the Jews of Spain. My uncle said, "Oh, so you must have been learning about how they sinned, and they were punished for their sins by being expelled." Now I could see my father begin to inflate, ready to argue all the points that were made. And so I said to my uncle instead, I said, "Well, this class focuses more on politics and economics and those kind of factors. We don't get into theology very much. It's more about history." And so my uncle said, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." As my father and I were walking home after dinner that night, he turned to me and he said, "I saw what you did there. You see, I didn't have to fight." My father's experience with his Jewish tradition was rejection, rebellion, self-emancipation, resistance to what had been forced down his throat. My father's family had absolutely rejected his first marriage, which was to a lapsed Polish Catholic, and their indifference to his 3 children from that partnership still rankled him. My experience was curiosity, exploration, understanding without any fear that my Jewish freedoms were at risk. You see, my mother was Jewish. During those occasional visits, we would attend Shabbat morning services at his family's Orthodox synagogue. For him, it was a visit to the past. For me, it was an anthropological expedition, studying Jewish practices very different from my own. Yet those practices were still related to me, part of my family tree, if a bit further back and a bit further away. Some humanistic Jews share my father's experience, breaking away from a strict religious tradition that no longer spoke to them. Some of us here share mine, raised in a self-aware, secular, or humanistic Jewish approach. Some of us were raised just Jewish, doing things their own way in an eclectic mix of nostalgia, creativity, and practicality, holding Passover Seders on the Saturday during Passover week instead of on the first or second night, lighting Hanukkah candles when the kids were home from college instead of on schedule. Some of us were raised in conventional religious Jewish identities with synagogues and rabbis and prayer books and prescribed beliefs and practices, which our family followed in our own eclectic way. Some of us were told we were Jewish, but that was it for content and experience. And some of us were not even told that, but discovered later in life that we had Jewish heritage. Some of us became part of the Jewish story later, through marriage to someone Jewish, or through our own personal journey. And many of us are a little of each of those. The irony for me is that my tradition is Eifo Ori and Naaseh Shalom, and doing what we humanistic Jews do when we do Jewish. That's my tradition. In fact, the melody that we use today for Eifo Ori is not the traditional melody I learned growing up that had been written in the 1970s. The version we use was composed in the 1990s. Secular Israelis think of the song Mi Ha'ish as one of their secular, traditional Jewish hymns. It quotes the Bible. But if they actually read Psalm 34, on which the song is based, they don't feel like it's traditional at all. It's not their traditional secular song. If you look up Psalm 34, and then look up the lyrics to Mi Ha'ish, you will see how picking and choosing can turn a pious psalm into a humanistic hymn that resonates with its traditional source. That's the key point when it comes to Jewish tradition or to any complicated relationship. We all pick and choose. The ultra-Orthodox do not read Yehuda Amichai or Leah Goldberg or our Rabbi Emeritus Daniel Friedman. We do not generally read the Chatam Sofer or the Sfat Emet or other Orthodox authorities. Even the traditional prayer book is a collage of verses from all over the Hebrew Bible, cut and paste, pick and choose, create and recreate. So too with our complicated relationships. There are times we are closer with each other, and there are times we need space to do our own thing. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we do not, even as we stay in relationship. To lighten the heated argument at home, I have occasionally told my children, I always love you, but right now I don't particularly like you. That's a complicated relationship, but it's real, and it's honest, and if we're honest about it, we can get past the conflict to a better connection. Jewish tradition is a cafeteria. We can stop at any one of many stations to explore what tastes best to our palate. When we sit down to eat together, your tray will look different from mine, and that's just fine. What do you think of as traditional Jewish food? Many people point to a bagel with lox and cream cheese. I hate to break it to you, but bread in a circle dates back to Roman times. Rings of dough that are boiled and then baked appear in a 13th century Syrian cookbook as a dish called ka'ak, and a Polish equivalent of boiled and baked bread is described in writing at the end of the 14th century. The first Jewish reference to a bagel is 200 years after that. Lox comes from a common Indo-European root for salmon, and cream cheese was invented in America in the 1870s. Never mind the debate today over the authentic bageldom of Asiago cheese bagels or blueberry bagels. And bagels today are sold and eaten everywhere by everyone. Does that mean that bagel with lox and cream cheese is not Jewish tradition? Ridiculous. Of course it is. It is just not exclusively Jewish and not universally Jewish either. My father's traditional Jewish foods from his Syrian Jewish mother's table included mejadra, a dish with lentils and rice, bitachol, a bulgur wheat with thin pasta, ijib adunes, an omelet made with potatoes, and even baked circles of dough called ka'ak. This beautiful cookbook is called Aromas of Aleppo. The author's name is Pupa Dweck, and it's the same last name as my grandmother's maiden name, Dweck. It is an entree into Jewish foods far beyond bagels and kugel. It's still traditional, it's still Jewish, maybe new to you, but part of the Jewish cafeteria of choices to create your own tradition. Tradition is an inheritance, and an inheritance is a complicated relationship. We usually receive an inheritance after a loss. The ones who owned the item before us may have used it very differently than we might choose to, if we choose to keep it at all. What we inherit becomes ours as well as theirs, theirs through history and memory and association, ours in the present and in the future. Are we to be museum curators of Jewish tradition, trying to preserve it? Or are we true heirs who choose whether and how to incorporate that inheritance into our lives? Our inheritance is ours, yet our lives are our lives to live. Complicated? Sure. Complication is an opportunity for creativity. At the end of a beautifully written survey of modern Jewish history, as Jews went from a world of traditional authority to the complicated freedom we enjoy, historian Howard Sacker concludes with this message. You may recognize this passage as something we have chosen for our services and celebrations. Its message articulates what we do and who we are. There are those who now look back in complacency and indifference, who accept the fruits of the long journey but ignore the bitter cost of liberation and its lessons in tenacity and endurance. They are the strangers, and the road passes them by. There are others who look back in gratitude and humility, who remember that few present blessings have been won without the sacrifices of the past, who continually reevaluate the spiritual and cultural treasures that the travail of the journey has produced. These are the true heirs of the generations, and for them, the long and agonizing journey has been worthwhile. I wish you all a hearty Shana Tova, a happy and healthy new year. Rosh Hashanah is an end and a beginning. As the calendar progresses, as the leaves fall, we do not fear change, for we know that cold will follow warmth, and then warmth will follow cold again. At the turning of the year, we know that years, like seasons, continue to come and go. We are renewed in our purpose. We must create lives of meaning. We must be true to ourselves. We must truly live. Tekiah! Once again, Shana Tova. Please turn to the people near you and wish them Shana Tova as well.